Hello and welcome. We begin with the latest updates from the Sudan civil war, a conflict that is now at a decisive turning point. Sudan Army Chief Abdel Fattah Al-Burhan has declared the capital Khartoum free of the rival paramilitary, the Rapid Support Forces. This after nearly 2 years of bloody civil war. Now, the army chief made the announcement from inside the recaptured presidential palace in his first visit there since it was seized by the RSF shortly after the war broke out in April of 2023. Burhan was seen marching through the war-ravaged palace in military fatigues, his first raised high and flanked by soldiers chanting, "God is greatest." The declaration comes as the Sudanese armed forces have made major territorial gains in the past few days, marking their most significant advance since the war began. The Khartoum region is divided into 3 main areas: Khartoum City, the official capital, Omdurman, and Bari. Now together they form what is called Greater Khartoum, all linked by strategic bridges across the Nile and the Blue Nile. The army has now made major advances in central Khartoum, the inner core of the capital. Now, in a lightning offensive, they first captured Al-Rawad residential complex, one of the largest housing complexes in the city. They then stormed and secured the presidential palace. Following this, the army regained control of most of central Khartoum, including ministries, banks, and government offices. And finally, they captured the Khartoum International Airport, which is the last major stronghold of the RSF in the capital. But reports say that the RSF remains present in parts of eastern Khartoum, as well as in the isolated pockets in Bari and Omdurman. New drone footage released by the Sudan Army shows people moving across the Jebel Olia Dam, located in the southern outskirts of Khartoum state. The army claims that these are RSF fighters retreating from the capital. Meanwhile, in Port Sudan, crowds took to the streets celebrating the army's gains. Port Sudan is currently acting as the de facto capital. It became a refuge for hundreds of thousands who fled after the RSF captured Khartoum.
The joy, as you can see, fills the whole area. Thanks to God, everyone is happy, even the residents of Port Sudan. God willing, we will return to Khartoum and celebrate Eid in our homes. Personally, I will be the first one to return, God willing.
Despite these heavy blows to the RSF, analysts warn that the war is far from over. While the army has made gains in several regions, including Khartoum, Northern State, the River Nile State, the Red Sea State, and others, the RSF still controls most of Western Sudan, including the entire Darfur region, where they have now announced a parallel government. Now, this parallel authority was declared under a political agreement signed in Nairobi last month, further hardening the battle lines and raising fears of a de facto partition. The Sudan conflict has also drawn major foreign players, each accused of fueling the war by supporting one side or the other. Both the Sudan Army and the RSF face accusations of civilian atrocities in a conflict that has already claimed up to 150,000 lives, according to some estimates. The Sudan Army had previously pledged a transition to civilian rule after regaining Khartoum. But under the current circumstances, will it keep that promise? Now, for more on this, we have with us Yusuf Bilal, a Horn of Africa expert who is joining us live from Meknes in Morocco. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Alyson.
So what does the Sudanese army's declaration that the capital is free of the RSF really signify in terms of actual control and, of course, stability on the ground?
Well, first, it means it's a major shift in the war between the RSF and the Sudanese army, because the big prize in Sudan, in all the conflicts in the history of Sudan, has always been the capital, Khartoum, where you have the center of political, military, and economic power, and where all the elite of the country has been living. So retaking control of Khartoum is a big win, a symbolic win, victory for the army, and also on the ground.
Right.
And the second aspect of it is that since the war started 2 years ago, most of the elites, I mean, all the elites actually, and the middle class left Khartoum and left Sudan for the neighboring countries. So the key question then would be how fast and what would be the conditions for them to return. And the third point is that now the government has been in Port Sudan for the last 2 years. Now will also bring back all its offices to the capital. So all this means that there will be an important shift in the dynamics of the war.
Right. And with the RSF consolidating its grip in the west and the army now gaining ground in central Sudan, are we now witnessing the early stages of a de facto partition of the country?
Well, Alyson, actually, we have been in a scenario of a de facto partition since the early days of the war. And what we'll have is that actually entrenching this de facto partition between Western Sudan, mostly Darfur, and the rest of the country that will be controlled by the government. Yeah. What we have to keep in mind is that partition, unfortunately, has been a constant given in the history of Sudan, whether when the South, which will later became independent in 2011, whether in the conflict, frozen conflict in South Kordofan and Blue Nile, the partition or an increasing limited authority of the central government over all the territories of Sudan has been actually the rule. So we will be in a situation where the RSF will regroup in the west in Darfur and will try to maintain its stronghold.
Right. And how are these shifting territorial dynamics likely to impact regional diplomacy and humanitarian access, especially in areas that are still under the RSF control?
Well, you know, humanitarian access officially, it still has to go through the government of Sudan. But obviously in the areas under the control of the Rapid Support Forces, and given that the RSF announced the establishment of its own parallel government that is not recognized by any country, it needs to be negotiated with those authorities, with the RSF, and mostly coming from Chad, which is a cross-border delivery of humanitarian aid. So it certainly it is part of the everyday negotiations that enables humanitarian aid to flow into the areas under control by the RSF.
Right. Yusuf, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa.
You're welcome.
Greeting you with aloha and namaste.
No, I love India.
Presence, occupation,
of a territory by another country pertains to India, what we saw in Kashmir.
How do you see Trump's America?
Yes, the current administration behaves differently from the previous administration.
Are you saying that there are foreign powers who are trying to bring down the current government in Syria?
Exactly.
Bluntly, Iran, maybe Russia too.
Prime Minister Modi committed to South-South, cooperation.
Not over 50%.
Is Ukraine prepared to pay the price for that peace?
No compromises at the cost of territorial integrity and sovereignty.